the financialization of Bitcoins, ETFs, custodians, the treasury companies. I'm curious if those centralizations of Bitcoin actually risk the decentralization of Bitcoin.
If it couldn't kill it, it just kept getting stronger. And what would it have to do? It would have to co-opt it.
I don't believe that it's being co-opted per se, but I believe that they will make every attempt that they can to co-opt it.
It has to be as chaotic and messy on the way through, and lots of people are going to get wrecked.
Self-custody is so early, man. Listen, we're if we're being intellectually honest, I don't think that we've reached the mainstream adoption.
I'm actually really curious your view of AI markets right now.
What's the marginal cost of a line of code creating other lines of code? So how can the CapEx be paid back?
When that bubble pops, it's going to be one of the most spectacularly large bubble pops. It's going to create so much pain. I just don't think that that's coming yet.
All right. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me today. Very excited to have this conversation. Scott, I actually wanted to start with you today because I feel like you set this interesting bridge between the everyday investor kind of watching price and Jeff, who's thinking in decades about what money does to society. So to begin, I want to ask you, do you share Jeff's view that Bitcoin is inevitable so long as it stays decentralized, secure, and private? And also, what's your read on the pace of adoption? Because my worry here is, especially kind of post-COVID, I'm concerned that more people are getting sucked into the existing system rather than escaping it.
Wow. Lots to unpack there. So first of all, thanks for having me. And Jeff, great to see you twice in 2 weeks. Big win for me, regardless. Because I definitely share Jeff's belief, obviously, that Bitcoin is inevitable. But I think there can be endless debate as to what that means, right? Inevitable as what? I think what would be the big question, and that sort of leads into where things currently stand. My belief is that most of the negative things we're seeing are just a function of price being down and it being a bear market. And for better or for worse, higher prices will probably change sentiment, will probably bring more people. And that's just the way that humans generally behave when it comes to what they view as financial assets. But, I think we are in the best place we've ever been with Bitcoin ever. And because price is down, people don't see it that way. But I think if you, take a time machine back 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, the inevitability was a lot harder to have conviction in. Jeff had the conviction. But I think for most people, it was a lot harder to have that sort of conviction. And now the level of adoption is almost something that would have made you pinch yourself a few years ago. Now, we can, once again, we can endlessly debate whether that's the adoption that Bitcoiners want or what it means. But I think the only way that you can believe Bitcoin is inevitable if it goes directly through the existing financial system and has some meaningful level of adoption from the biggest institutions and the government. So I think that it's right on schedule. To be quite frank, I think it's just an uncomfortable path to get there. I don't know if that answers the question fully, but it certainly answers the first part.
No, fair enough. I do want to just double tap on a few things there. You're talking about Bitcoin being the best place. I'm curious exactly what you mean by that. And then additionally, it sounds to me like number go up is what we need. That adoption is going to come from number go up, and hopefully that'll get some more excitement. But with everything going in AI and one of the ideas I've been playing around with was that COVID kind of pulled forward demand, almost like using credit, that it was such a kind of unveiling, taking off the mask, such a totalitarian kind of crazy moment that we maybe sucked in people early. And I feel like we almost have this debt that's going to take a little while before we really capture imagination again. But I'm curious how you see that playing out.
I think it's just a hot ball of money that's circulating, and crypto is no longer in vogue, and AI and software, memory are the things that are hot right now, and that will inevitably return. So I think that what you're describing is more just about natural market cycles and less about actual adoption on the ground. I mean, when you talk about the best it's ever been, think about how many legitimate existential crises we had over the past decades, whether it was the block size wars, of course, the collapses of CeFi in 2022. By the way, it's hard not to conflate crypto and Bitcoin here, so I want to be clear that I don't think any of those were crises for Bitcoin itself as an asset. But there was certainly a time when it felt like, because of those collapses and that conflation, that there was a very contentious relationship with governments and institutions, and there was a legit effort, I think, to kill it. And I think now that is over. It's become a part of the mainstream conversation. The governments, for better or for worse, are planning the way that they're going to interact with it. And that's what I mean by it's the best that it's ever been, right? I mean, if you zoom out and you are depressed that Bitcoin is in the 60,000s, I don't know what to tell you, right? because 10 years ago it was, I was buying it the first times in the 1000, 1800, 2000 region. It's crazy, that you could have a negative sentiment of something that's performed that exceptionally well. I just think it's hard to get past the price aspect of it for people to really see the meaningful level of adoption and importance that Jeff, I think, can speak much more eloquently to.
Well, Jeff, let me get your thoughts on that. Where do you think we're in the best spot that we've ever been right now? And what are your feelings currently on adoption?
I think it needs to look exactly like this as it goes through us. When you say financial system, let's just park that for a minute. But it has to go through each of us and our changes in it to move forward. So let's go back to the financial system, which most people focus on, and most people focus on it. It needs to be going up in the existing financial system. So, but at first principles, what does that mean? Right. We know that the debt is insolvent today. The $350 trillion of debt in the world is insolvent today, and it's only solvent by giving away your energy, by debasing your currency. That creates misallocation of capital and a whole bunch of people that centralized money at the top that controls everything, giant capital pools. And so when we're talking about those capital pools, they have to understand Bitcoin and they're going to grab Bitcoin. You're talking about something is insolvent, that gives that only is solvent by your time inside that system debasing you, saying that it wins when they debase you more, right? That's right. That's what the crux of the first principle conversation that we're having there is exactly what I said. And so you're cheering that capital pool to come in because it's the only way for Bitcoin to work. And likely if you were there, so the way I describe Bitcoin is different than that capital system. And it's really important because I describe it if it stays decentralized and secure, that all prices fall like they should in a free market. So I don't describe it in the terms of the existing financial system. I describe it in the terms of what would have to happen, what would be imposed upon us, should Bitcoin stay decentralized and secure. Now, going back to Scott's question, what would you expect if this system, because they can't coexist. They actually, over a long period of time, they cannot coexist because they're opposites. You have a centralizing system that's only centralizing because you give it more of your energy, and government gets bigger, more surveillance, companies get bigger, those companies are the same AI companies that you use everything in, and they get bigger and bigger by extracting more of your time. Right. So that just turns into one giant surveillance system. And of course, that system would try to attack Bitcoin. And then if it couldn't attack it, if it couldn't kill it, which had been going on for 16 years, if it couldn't kill it through China's going to shut it down, we're going to do this, like every single, it's bad for the environment, every single attack, social attack and everything else, if it couldn't kill it, it just kept getting stronger. Then what would it have to do? It would have to co-opt it. Right? Not bad people, not bad, right? Just it would have to, because the systems are incompatible. One's the free market, one's not. So underneath that conversation, this is why it's such a deep process. We have to decide where we're giving our energy. Each of us. And each of us, for Bitcoin to remain decentralized and secure, more people need to move their energy to Bitcoin, spend in Bitcoin. It has to be private. It has to add a whole bunch of different layers, and that battle, kind of our own hypocrisy in that, trying to make more money in the thing that we know is stealing our time and energy, and blaming somebody else and cheering for more of it, would have to resolve in us, right? And so what that would mean, each of us what that would mean is this would be a really chaotic transition, because we've never seen a transition like this before in our lives, and we're part of the transition. There is no Bitcoin is us, right? We either run nodes or we don't. We either spend in it or we don't. We either invest in building layers to add privacy or we don't. So it is and there is no thing outside of us. So if we broadly choose, we're going to give all our time to a system that's trapping us, that we know is insolvent, and we're cheering for more money from. Where did that money come from? It came from us, right? And so we're cheering for more of the money that's coming from us, because those people know better for Bitcoin price to go up in relative to that system. So, but what I just described is so difficult to see in each of us, because it challenges our own identity, and it's not, and that's why this thing, I actually agree with Scott, is it's stronger than ever, even against all of these wars that are happening, BIP 110, Core, ColdCard, everything else. It has to look like this, because we've never experienced something that we actually had agency in, that we could decide. And most people, and the vast majority of people, are blaming somebody else and living in the system that they're creating from that. But we either have a choice or we don't.
Interesting. Scott, kind of in response to that, I want to get your take on this first, because I have a sneaking suspicion which way Jeff would go, but I'm curious your take. So you talked about, I think you both kind of described it would always look this way. And what I'm thinking about is the financialization of Bitcoin. So specifically like ETFs, the custodians, the treasury companies. I agree that was kind of always going to happen at some point in time. I'm curious, Scott, in your view, if those centralizations of Bitcoin in any way actually risk the decentralization of Bitcoin if it is a co-opting of Bitcoin. And the kind of catch-22 that I'm thinking of there is that I largely agree the best marketing is number go up. So them and their hot ball of money will probably drive up the price, which would then drive up adoption as well too. So it almost seems like counter forces. But I just want to get your take on the overall financialization of Bitcoin.
Once again, I think that that's the inevitable process and the messy path that Jeff described. So it's funny, because when Jeff was speaking, I looked up one of my old tweets, because I remember that I once made the unfortunate mistake of using the word co-opted in a tweet about Bitcoin. And I had to look it up to see, because every Bitcoiner jumped down my throat. This is in July of 2025. I said, Bitcoin's amazing, but it's obviously been co-opted to some degree by the very people that it was created as a hedge against. Many of the most ardent early whales have seen their faith shaken and have been selling at these prices. So this was below. It was a subtweet to me saying that we were seeing massive selling from early whales that said that they would never sell, which factually we can see on chain and was true. And in conversations that I had with quite a few of them, I'm trying to eat on Yago, Bruce Fenton, they said that they had a lot of early Bitcoin friends who had given up because they didn't like the way that it was interacting with institutions in Wall Street and the government. I'm not saying I disagree, agree. I was trying to state something that I believed was factually true that I had heard on the ground, and people, the Bitcoin community attacked that. How could it be co-opted? People sell for different reasons, all these things. I don't believe that it's being co-opted per se, but to Jeff's point, I believe that they will make every attempt that they can to co-opt it, right? But I think historically what we've seen is, regardless of the wrapper that you put Bitcoin in, a meaningful percentage of people who interact with it over a certain amount of time eventually come home to doing it what we would consider the right way, right? So like, I mean, there's plenty of people who first bought Dogecoin or first bought an NFT and are now Bitcoiners, right? Jeff, nobody probably has watched someone's trajectory more closely than Jeff has watched mine from, and I remember, Nathan, your first question to me was, are you Bitcoin only now, Scott? Because I can't really have you on if you're not, right? And I think I responded, I'm Bitcoin mostly, I think my joke was, I still own a house, buddy, but, so I think there's levels to it, and we're all sort of on that path. But I think that a lot of people who buy IBIT for the first time will inevitably find their way on that path. So just because they buy it through an institutional wrapper, even if you believe that institution is trying to co-opt it, the inevitable conclusion is that a meaningful percentage of those people end up holding spot Bitcoin in some form of self-custody and believing that it's money, right? So I am not particularly concerned about the centralization. I mean, I think, there's always these arguments. Is the central... First, it was, by the way, that mining was too centralized in China.
Yep.
Right. And that was the big problem. And then all of a sudden in 21, China banned mining for the 700th time. And then apparently that meant it was centralized in the United States. So what everyone cheered for was that we would, kill the centralization in China and it would go elsewhere. And immediately the same narrative carried through, even though we got the result that we wanted, which was a lack of centralization in China. Right. So I think these narratives are extremely sticky and they take a long time to wash their way through the system. But I would hope that all three of us would agree here that anyone gaining exposure to Bitcoin in almost any fashion for the first time is a good step in the right direction.
No, I would largely agree. I actually want to expand on that a little bit more because I think it's a really interesting point that maybe some people share, some people be fascinated by. You kind of hinted at maybe that Jeff might have been helping you down the path a little bit or pulling you down the path over the years, maybe sending you some text and bugging you a bit there. I'm curious what it's personally looked for you moving more of your time and energy into Bitcoin. When did this transition maybe start, or when do you kind of identify was maybe a major turning point, and kind of where have you landed now? Do we have a node in the office yet? Are we running a node in the office yet? How far along this path have we gone?
I was so running a node. Those things are things I did. Right. So I don't want to give the impression that I wasn't passionate about it or didn't understand it from the beginning. It was sort of that I had to, unfortunately, like many humans, learn all of the hard lessons very personally to slowly make my way down the path. Right. And listen, I'm not of the belief that every other crypto asset in existence is necessarily a scam. I think there's some good faith efforts for people to do things. It's just, I think that structurally, a lot of them are broken or uninvestable when you start to take a look. And I've always viewed Bitcoin as a completely separate asset class from the rest of crypto, which I don't think a lot of people understand my view on that, but it is how I view it. Sort of like, I think you can buy gold and buy Amazon and it's okay. You haven't violated the code of the gold bug. But that said, my time and energy is in Bitcoin because the more you wash through the rest of the ecosystem and the more you kind of see the pain that people go through and the cycles and the centralized washouts, the more you realize that this doesn't really need to be complicated and there's only, one system that you want to be a part of. And, I think that Jeff, once again, articulates that much better. But once you're in Bitcoin and you start to denominate your life in Bitcoin, and I'm not saying that I'm 100% there, right? It's still live in a world where I pay my kids tuition and I go on trips and I spend dollars and I, mentally find myself caring about it. But once you start down that path, everything else seemingly becomes noise because you just realize that it's a waste of your time and energy and certainly a waste of your money.
No, 100%. Jeff, I saw you nodding. I want to get your response there.
Yeah, I think Scott just did a really good job explaining that process, and it's a process that I've watched happen to thousands of people, happen to me, right? And it's why I don't judge people for where they are, right? So I agree that whatever gets people into Bitcoin the first way that and then take more steps, and you'll see as you take more steps that everything gets easier. But you can't see that from the other system, and you can't see it when you're measuring from the other system. What you would do, what would be normal, just a rational actor. Their food prices are going up, their house prices are going up. They want a house. They have an idea in their mind of my family living in this house. The house is only going up. The food prices are only going up because money is going down. And so the rational actor is inside that system, which is everything. They're on Twitter, hearing it, everything else. All the economists that they look up to, they're telling them, here's how you do this. All of the financial advisors that tell them, the government telling them exactly why everything looks like this, and it's this other person's fault. And so they're in this every day. They're in the news media every day. And their rational thing is not, there's a new system outside of that system that I can self-secure and be completely in. All of their energy is inside that system. All of their life is being from that system. So if you gave somebody the rational choice of prices go up just naturally, right? And they didn't know all of these things, and they didn't know how they could just remove all of the bullshit, right? Step out of that system. The rational choice would be, oh, I could take Bitcoin and get 11.5% interest rate. I don't have to hold it. Somebody else is going to hold it, and I get money, right? And that rational choice, that rational choice, when Scott did it himself with Celsius, what you find is it's not rational because it's built on theft. And those things always get liquidated, and you thought you were taking no risk and you get destroyed. And then if you don't just wash out and you're completely wrecked, because that's what the financial system is doing, eventually you start to realize what I thought was rational isn't rational at all. And you start to move deeper and deeper. But how could I judge any single person for making that rational choice in their life, right? And all of this thing, when I had to go through all of the same things myself, and I had to realize at the bottom of everything, I was also a hypocrite. That I was telling people what to do in Bitcoin. Well, I wasn't. Right. And so once I've made that choice, now I can be like, it's okay. Right. That nobody controls me. I can do what I want. I am free. I'm investing in freedom tech. I'm completely free, and everything gets easier. Everything gets easier. But I can only see how much easier now from a new position that I wasn't in before. Right. And so now I look at all of these people in their belief system that's trapped within the greater belief system, because money is subordinate to everything. And they believe it so strongly, they're giving it more and more strength. You say what I'm saying, I sound like a lunatic. Right?
But they're born with it.
They're born with it. Their parents were born with it. They're every single piece of media, it's all the same structural problem. That they have no idea, and they're listening to charlatans or people, well-meaning people, trying to inside a system that cannot fix it. It's not a person problem; it's a system problem. And so that would be that's why this has to look exactly like it looks. There have to be blow-ups. There have to be, because what would I do? And like I would, because I understand this to the core, right? But I understand why people would take leverage against their Bitcoin to buy a house, and the Bitcoin price goes down and they get margin called on the Bitcoin. They don't own Bitcoin anymore. And it has to go through that because we've never lived in the free market. All of our ideas for what it looks like are coming from a manipulated market, and it gives so much weight to all of the ideas within the system. We can't even see how absolutely simple the premise is.
The interesting thing, whenever I hear Jeff talk about the abundance of deflation, and when I talk to my friends who are as deeply ingrained in this as possible, the Wall Street guys, I went to Penn in the '90s. All my friends are either private equity, hedge fund, or somewhere adjacent. They think I'm a lunatic, right? But imagine a world where, you didn't worry about the price of Bitcoin going up, and that wasn't the, big billboard advertising why people would want it. Whether that, we don't say that's the reason, but we know that, people line up at the door to buy something when it's going up and they don't like it when it's down. If we just talked about the fact that if it just stayed the same price, but everything became cheaper, how excited they would be. If we could somehow eliminate the entire price part of the Bitcoin story and just say, as Jeff has told me before, you have told, I don't know the exact numbers, but the value of your house in Bitcoin, as it's, obviously you buy a house, and my friend CJ Constantinos, he's always talks about how he bought a house for 100 Bitcoin, however many years ago, and what that's now, what is
now 10, 5,
yeah. So I think if we could somehow, follow in what Jeff has written and make people understand that you could just hold Bitcoin, not look at the price in dollars, and watch everything else go down, how compelling that would be for most people. Like if you understood that your groceries were a tenth the price that they used to be, right?
And then you start to realize that system that you give all your energy to, the only reason that prices go up is because you're giving all your energy to it, and you're thinking that there's it's either Trump or it's Biden or somebody else. It's not capitalism. It's not the free market. It has nothing to do. It's a control system. So if all these other people are being controlled, and they don't know the answer, and you look at all these people and it's getting crazier and crazier and crazier, shouldn't you ask, what don't I see? Where might I be getting controlled too? But once you understand that, you tune it all out. That it has to look like this. You don't give it any more weight than it deserves, because it's a system completely built on theft, completely. The money can't be paid back. It only can be paid back by stealing more from you. So what would you expect? What would you expect from that vantage point everything to look like? If you're measuring Bitcoin within that system, what would you expect Bitcoin to look like from your perspective? So it's just all these things become really evident, and I've spent a lot of time, as you know, Nathan, and Scott, a lot of time thinking of kind of what this would look like across populations and why they would misunderstand this, what would what people would do to try to co-opt it, all of the different layers on this, and what would be the response from Bitcoin. And so I say the fights, and they even the co-option, if it existed, also creates a reflexive action for a whole bunch of people to say to create value in the market, to keep it more secure, to make sure it's private, to create. So I'm not mad at all about all of the fights and everything and all the centralization, because it creates the opportunity for entrepreneurs to solve the real problem underlying that centralization in the first place.
One company I like pointing people to when they ask about Bitcoin mining is Abundant Minds. They were founded by Bo and Christine Turner after losing over $500,000 to broken promises in the mining industry. And they built their hosting model to remove the usual headaches. With Abundant Minds, you own your machines and keep 100% of the Bitcoin you mine. There's no revenue share, no hidden skims. Pricing is simple. One flat monthly fee covers power, parts, labor, and repairs. They also guarantee uptime. If a machine goes down, their hash rate redirect system routes hash power from their fleet, so earnings don't just stop, and every machine is insured at full replacement value. Everything is hosted in the US, powered by Hydro, and mining equipment may qualify for 100% year one bonus depreciation. Learn more at abundantminds.com/sessions.
Scott, I want to kind of double tap on something going back for just a moment here. I think you mentioned that you were, was it Penn State? Did I have that correct? It was Penn State?
University of Pennsylvania, but
University of Pennsylvania.
Place, so it's fine.
My apologies. This is my Canadian lack of knowledge about the American system.
Hilarious. There was such an insecurity about it at my school that they sold T-shirts in the gift shop that said "Not Penn State."
Okay.
Actually true story. So yeah.
The old crew from university, the friends you still have in the existing financial system, they're already very well aware of Bitcoin. I'm just kind of curious, and I'm gauging. So I have this idea. We've heard it kind of in academia that kind of science moves forward one funeral at a time. Like I think everyone's aware of Bitcoin at this point in time. The people that are most open to it, we've probably already got. It might be generational kind of transitions going forward. It might take a little bit longer than maybe any of us want it to. But with the friends in the existing system, I'm curious. There's been so much that happened to Bitcoin over the last couple of weeks between ColdCard, and we had Bolts, and we had BTC Pay Server and Zeus Wallet, and we had the BIP110 soft fork. Did it make it outside? Okay, no, they had no idea.
No, so listen, it did. I think ColdCard hit the Bloomberg terminal
for
about 5 minutes, and I think most people are savvy enough to say that Bitcoin didn't believe Bitcoin was hacked, right? They understood that it was a custody solution. I think that was a very internal crisis. In fact, I think we were talking about this. I was talking about this with someone this morning, but if you're an institution. First of all, these guys are all wealthy, which is why they don't care about Bitcoin. For better or for worse, they're in that system, but they're doing quite well. If you're, in your house in the Hamptons driving your Singer Porsche, I don't think you really, are going to need to get it necessarily as fast as everybody else. But having a conversation this morning that let's say that at the most cynical view, institutions are trying to co-opt it, or at least they're trying to meaningfully, gather assets under management. These are the kind of things that would theoretically excite them. Right? Because we've seen a narrative in the past few weeks that, okay, if self-custody is broken, people are just going to buy the ETF and call it a day. Right? And so, and I think there's people who even point to the data and say that there was a spike in ETF buying. I don't know that I necessarily buy that, or if it's, just coincidence. But either way, I do think that there are a meaningful amount of people on the margin who haven't gone down the self-custody rabbit hole or are new to it, who are just going to say, F this. I'm going to buy an ETF and put it in my Schwab account because I know it's quote unquote safe. Right. And those are the people who I maybe still haven't quite gone far enough down the rabbit hole to view it as money. They still view it as an investment. They're still concerned with, price going up or how it performed and the Sharpe ratio and all those things, which I think are relevant to talk about. But on the margin, I do think that more people will be pushed towards, quote unquote, QC, qualified custodians, trusted entities to hold their Bitcoin for them because they're more scared of self-custody than they were a few weeks ago. So it's a long way of saying I think that people who are not deeply in the echo chamber never got that far anyways to care about those things. But if you are here, there could be a bit of a crisis of confidence for some people on the margin.
No, 100%. And then even, I think I saw, again, I'm not saying that it was like suspicious timing. I think it was iBit lowered the in-kind redemption from like 25 million to 1 million. I was like, oh, that was convenient. We're just lowering the door a little bit.
But from my friend Hunter at Bitwise, who I love. And I think he kind of put it in, like qualified it. He said, I'm not saying this is a good thing for Bitcoiners, but somebody did just convert 8 million in spot Bitcoin to the Bitwise spot ETF, right? And he kind of pointed out the fact that it's happening without necessarily saying, I believe people should move their money from self-custody into the ETF, right? So it's out there. The narrative is out there, and I would imagine that there's institutions who see an opportunity there because they believe in their product. And I don't think that makes them evil or anything, right? They deeply believe in their product and want people to, buy more of it. So I do think we're going to see some of that while this self-custody situation sort of washes through.
No, fair enough. And before I come to Jeff, Scott, I just want kind of like your personal take on this. From all that happened, and again, I am in no way trying to minimize. The huge loss and like personal suffering that people that got affected by this went through. But I think we're just like over 2,000 coins, and if I compare it back to like Mt. Gox, like 170,000 coins. If I compare it back to, was it Quadriga CX? I think it was like 60,000. It was relatively small compared to like Bitfinex and other big hacks and things we've had in the past. And even hearing that, like, it didn't, like, it maybe crossed the Bloomberg terminal for all of 5 minutes, that actually kind of put me back on my heels a little bit in the sense that I feel like we have a lot of work still ahead of us. We're not nearly as far along the self-custody journey as I perhaps thought. In some ways, like, I'm glad less people were necessarily affected, but I realized that maybe we're not as far along in Bitcoin adoption as I would have hoped or would have thought at the time. I just want to get your personal take.
Well, it goes back to what I said before. The adoption, because of where we are at on the trajectory through the institutions of government, I think most of the adoption is now going to start with the wrapped products and then find its way down to self-custody. I don't think the majority of people who are getting into Bitcoin right now, and maybe I'm cynical, are buying Bitcoin for the first time and sending it to self-custody. That said, I was pretty shocked at how many people's data, Trezor and bits of gold and SafePal were able to leak. Because that means that tens of thousands of people have been buying hardware wallets. So I could be wrong, actually, because that, I will say, I was shocked that there was like, 35,000 people or whatever the number. I think SafePal was 35, the other one was 20, whatever it was. That many people have bought wallets in the past 6 months to year and were able to have their data leaked. So maybe I'm just kind of not seeing the forest through the trees here. But I think we're self-custody is so early, man. Listen, we're like, if we're being intellectually honest about where we're at, like when the arguments come down to rolling dice for entropy and the quality of your dice, I don't think that we've reached the mainstream adoption level yet.
Yeah, but keep going on that. So there needs to be different implementations that obviously there was a kind of a free market attack here or failure here, that it got seen really quickly, and then the reaction is one of two things, right? Or one of three things. I'm going back. I'm going to trust somebody else. At the bottom of all Bitcoin, self-custody is the same thing, right? Whether it's an institution or yourself, right? So I'm going to trust somebody else, and I'm going to increase a different tail risk that I don't actually have Bitcoin. I have an institutional version of Bitcoin that is going to get captured in one way, or I'm going to learn more about, because even at the bottom of that ColdCard, if you didn't dice roll, what you were actually saying, I'm not saying people should dice roll, but what we were saying is I trust them to do the job and they say don't trust, don't verify. And their entire marketing was don't trust, verify. Yet most people trusted, right? And most people do the easy thing. So they don't see their own agency in it. Now that will create the third, that kind of radical agency that we've never had that we have to trust ourselves. Now that creates the third thing, a market opportunity to solve that problem in a different way that a whole bunch of entrepreneurial talent goes to solve to make this easier, to be able to do this, to be able to, and this is, but those are the choices that come from these thing, and it's not just one, it's all of the choices combined, all are happening at the same time across this new paradigm. And each person is welcome to make whatever choice they want. But what ends up happening is they also have to live with the consequences of that choice, because this new thing is going to liquidate people over and over and over again because they've never actually lived in the free market. They've never lived with the consequences of their choices as deep as this is. So this is kind of why this has to play out like this.
No, fair enough. It kind of even just immediately reminds me of something like the education system and in the public education system, where we've had it for so long now. People can't envision like, well, if you take it away, you're taking away schools. It's like, no, we can still have teachers in schools. It's just going to be provided by the free market. And funny enough, Jeff, to that point, I just dropped a recent interview where I had someone from Jade, from Passport, from Trezor, and from Seed Signer kind of all discussing what had happened. And one of I think the big takeaways from that is that we need the free market of competition in order to figure out the best kind of custody solutions and optionality kind of going forward. So diving in a little bit deeper, Jeff, putting maybe on your, maybe your investor hat for just a moment here, how do you think about it in terms of usability for Bitcoin adoption and self-custody versus the security and trust trade-offs? What's your kind of take on the situation? How do you view that going forward?
So I loved Scott's tweet about so I realize I'm in an echo chamber, and at the very tip of that echo chamber, and we see tons of companies competing to provide more value and tons of different ideas. We're going to get that wrong. Some of the things we invest in are going to fail in the free market. Some are going to be successful, and it's hard to tell you exactly what that looks like. It's an explosion of ideas that most people don't see until they're using the thing, right? And all of the different ideas of that. But if I just said, take my mom into Bitcoin, or to somebody, or most of my friends that I would have this conversation, the mental bandwidth it takes to be able to do this, right? And across all of these things and this different thing, and compare that to, I just want to live my life, right? I just want this to be easy. The trade-off is simplicity. We use Google. We fall into a trap. Right now in AI, what's happening is in some of the frontier models that are guardrailed to not let you see everything else, are actually but they're better because they know you. You're feeding your information, and you're trapped in an so you don't see some of the other models. Right. So people will make these choices over and over and over again because the simplicity a lot of times comes at, I'm going to trust somebody else at the bottom. Right. I'm going to trust somebody else not to take advantage of me. Look at the entire monetary system where money is lent into existence, and you have a bank that protects your money, but it's not protecting your money. It's stealing your money.
Yeah.
Big institution, big walls, giant places you go to because they have vaults and everything else. The money is not taken from the vault; it's underneath that, right? When you don't know it. So but what it says is, it's so easy for us to abdicate our responsibility to somebody else because we believe in them. The monetary system wouldn't look like it does, and all of these things if we didn't do that. So it's just the big point, Nathan, is it has to be as chaotic and messy on the way through, and lots of people are going to get wrecked. I wish that it wouldn't happen. I wish people would take more responsibility. I wish more people would move their time, but that's up to them to decide.
Yeah, I asked the question, I guess, to both of you. So you talk about bringing grandma in, or inviting your mom or your friend. Like, I'm actually torn at how I would tell a brand new person in 2026 right now to custody their Bitcoin the first time that they buy 0.1 Bitcoin and want to hold it, right? because that what Jeff just described in the dice and the entropy, it's kind of this infinite regress of responsibility. Like the people who got hacked on ColdCard thought they did everything right, and and it's very hard to say to them, "Hey, you should have done more. You should have educated yourself further and known." Right? I mean, you hear the catchphrase self-custody. You are told that this is a device. You actually generated a seed phrase, and you put it on metal and you hid it away, and you still lost your money, right? Or you have gone down the rabbit hole and bought multiple devices, and then all of a sudden your data's leaked and some guy shows up at your house, right? So I think it is challenging time.
Yep.
Maybe for the first person who does buy Bitcoin, if it's just a little bit and they're interested in it, maybe buying it and, keeping it on an exchange isn't the worst thing in the world for the first little while they learn more about self-custody. I'm just not sure self-custody is ready to be the first solution that somebody who knows nothing jumps into in 2026. And that's saying something for me because I deeply believe in it.
No, 100%. I'll jump in there, and then Jeff, I'm curious your response there as well too. This whole event, fiasco, calamity has been unbelievably eye-opening. It's been horrifying and shocking in some respects. It's been incredibly encouraging in terms of the response from the Bitcoin community at large. People jumping on this, the red team, people getting out there. We had like Wicked and Portland Hodl and Shinobi were in spaces for what felt like 24 hours a day for maybe like 9 days straight, just helping people and get off the ColdCard, get the safety, get the information out there. And so one of the big takeaways that I've had that I've been really playing around with this idea, and Scott, to your point, I'm having similar sort of thoughts and conversations, is I think that originally I had a bad sort of analogy in terms of gold, where, if somebody goes and purchases gold and they put that in their vault, they're kind of done. It's over. The way that I've been looking at self-custody as of late, particularly with needing to stay up on updates and security updates with regards to what the red team's finding, what everyone's finding using like Kimi K3 now, is that I don't think Bitcoin self-custody can ever be a passive state. Kind of like nutrition or exercise, you must always be participating it in some way, whether it be that improving your skill set, whether it be learning about any updates or things that are going on, where about improving your overall security model. One of the most horrifying things that I unfortunately saw a lot of when we were helping people move is that there were people that I directly worked with, and we got set up a couple of years ago. Could be ColdCard with like a passphrase or straight to multi-sig. And at the time that we worked together, they'd mastered everything, but they hadn't touched it in like 2 years.
Things changed.
And they completely forgot. They completely forgot how to use the device, and especially in a high emotion and a panic situation, they just weren't able to do it. So to your point,
happen, by the way, like
really,
not exactly, but there was a time where I had like in the earlier days, I had an old ledger and it wouldn't come online, and then I typed it in twice, and I was like, "How is this wrong?" And the third time, it's over. And where I think everybody probably has those panic modes with self custody in the earlier times of doing it. So I'm not surprised to hear those stories. I do agree that it's an active pursuit. I just don't think most people probably have the time and energy for it, if that's how it eventually evolves. But we will find something. I mean, Jeff, when you tell somebody now, like, what's your first want to buy a little Bitcoin?
Yeah, no, everything you guys are saying, I think, is exactly it. I think it's an active process. I think that active process will inspire a whole bunch of new solutions that are easier to use out of this crisis. And it's really hard right now to tell somebody what to do. In fact, so I never promoted the ColdCard or never talked to people about that thing, but partially because it is such an active process and people need to learn themselves, and they need to, because the security model is has trade-offs everywhere, right? So the trade-off, if you said multi-sig security, different vendors and security, the trade-off is the complexity. If you're never going to look at it again, you're going to forget how to put this together, and that becomes a real risk. So so Scott and Nathan, I agree. And Nathan, I just want to say, I know you guys were kind of partly promoting ColdCard, but in the right way, dice rolls and everything else. But what you guys did, I can just imagine like how much time you guys spent. I sent a note to Ben. I had a whole bunch of people that I was helping in behind the scenes. So you see the other side of all of the people that giving their time to try to help people, and then in some cases donate to people who lost capital in this too. So you saw the brutal side of this and the beautiful side of this at the same time, which you'd expect in who we are.
Listen, I didn't promote ColdCard, but I promoted Voyager and I was using it, right? So it's unfortunately, it's part of the learning curve. When you yourself are deeply passionate about something, doesn't mean you can see every potential pitfall, right? And you go down. I'm very open about that, obviously, and it is what it is. But you tried to help people. I tried to help people, and here we are. It's just it's a very interesting crossroads, I think.
No,
I think a lot
100%.
of people have had their kind of come to God moment in the Bitcoin community over the past few months.
Yeah, it feels like it all got shoved into like a 10-day period. Like we just took everything and rammed it into a 10-day period. And even like I did, like I loved the ColdCard. I used it almost every day. It was one of my favorite tools out there. I promoted it and shared it with people and put my friends on it, put my family on it. And I was wrong for that. It's been incredibly humbling and having to reevaluate prior assumptions and things that I was building off to begin with. But even just quickly jumping back for a second, Scott, to your early point of like someone brand new, one of the things that I would definitely be encouraging to that point is even before you get off the exchange, like just show yourself. Can you move this to a hot wallet, just a small amount, and move it back? Can you recover it from your seed phrase? Like really make sure that the base knowledge that we're building on is in fact there, that you've got at least that before we start adding, to Jeff's point, additional complexity.
I mean, I use Casa multi-sig and have for years. Probably none of us should probably share exactly what we're doing, but when you for part of it, and they're very active in reminding you. So it's definitely on you if you haven't rotated your keys or refreshed your devices or any of those things or tested it every once in a while. So there are, I think, providers, that at least do their best to make sure that you're following the recommended steps to remain on top of it. But it's a job.
Yeah, I think just one of the ideas, and it's still kind of hot wallet. So there could be a risk of the malicious code in the over. But if you looked at Fediment overall, right, and if you looked at that type of solution inside this type of solution, you can run a multi-sig setup or Guardian setup, and you don't have to know the Guardians. So, and those Guardians are completely private from anything else, and all the transactions that happen on top of that. So if like Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin, the software that runs the whole thing is secure, then there would be no way to find the individual Guardians, and there would be no way to attack that. So as that ends up happening, then you could store an amount of money, and you could be totally in a private federation that no one had access to. Did you even have it? Right? What did it look like? If you trusted that in your own federation, you might be able to add your family members to that same federation, and you provide a different security model to look at this. I'm just highlighting there's a whole bunch of work behind the scenes that'll evolve into different security models with different trade-offs and the like that will spread this and I suspect make it a lot easier to use too.
That's my hope, and I imagine that we will get there again for those entrepreneurial forces, people trying to provide value. We're going to see new solutions, things we might not have even thought of yet come. I want to quickly actually do a bit of a hard pivot because I want to talk a little bit about AI as a forcing function and whether or not we'll see kind of AI calamity before maybe seeing Bitcoin adoption. But even before that, because out of my own curiosity, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Scott, you probably have forgotten more about the markets than I'll ever possibly know. So I'm just actually really curious your view of AI markets right now in totality. To me, it looks bubbly and frothy, but maybe I'm wrong.
Markets can remain irrational longer than you can remain solvent, is what I remind myself every time I try to call a bubble. Right? It's definitely a bubble, but within the system that Jeff often describes, it's hard to handicap how long those bubbles can exist or how large they can blow up. But I think we're still in the midterms of a expanding AI bubble. So I would be really remiss to try to call the top of that. I think that It's a hard question because once you realize that most of it, as Jeff says, is the denominator and not the actual value of it, it's hard to kind of express an opinion. I think that AI will continue up. I think they're going to spend billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars a year increasing the CapEx. So the fact that we're still in the infrastructure build out, I think, and you can see it with Bitcoin miners all becoming AI data centers, right? You can see where the excitement is. I think it will continue to grow and rise, but this is one of those things where when that bubble pops, it's going to be one of the most spectacularly large bubble pops. It's going to create so much pain. I just don't think that that's coming yet. So I think, but once again, that will probably look like the dot-com bubble where everything exploded and then the 6 or 7 biggest companies in the world kind of arose from the ashes, right? So I'm not excited to buy stocks. I'll just say frankly, and I've been saying this for a while, so maybe I've missed some of the boat, but I'm much more excited to buy Bitcoin in the 60s if I'm viewing it through an investment perspective, because you have to have multiple lenses, than I would be to buy buy any of these big IPOs that are coming, or Micron or any of these things. Also, I think there's a degree where you just become comfortable with what you become comfortable with, and you don't really need to look so far outside of that when you have conviction. And so, I have the part of my life where I spend hours a day trying to find the next big thing that's going to go up are over. I'm very happy to just take what I have and put it in Bitcoin and call it a day. So, I think AI there's so many different angles to discuss on it that it's hard to give one, I think, umbrella opinion.
Beautiful. I love it. Jeff?
Yeah. So similarly to Scott, if the only caveat, and it is the only one, that Bitcoin remains decentralized and secure, it's imposing the first free market that ever exists. Not maybe, for sure, imposing. And relative to the first free market that ever existed over time, not the bubbles and everything else, when liquidity drains everything out from everything else, you can't sell your house and you can sell Bitcoin. You can leverage Bitcoin, everything else. So you should expect these giant fluctuations in price of Bitcoin from the other system because of the massive nonsense that happens in the other system. But if it stays decentralized and secure, I keep saying that, it is imposing the first free market and all prices are falling relative to it, period. It isn't guessing what I just said. It is a function of that. And that would be really confusing. So then you can simplify your entire life and you can say, how does it stay decentralized and secure? What are the risks? What does that look like? Is it what trend is happening? And am I a part of this system that's moving that way? And why am I why am I overbuying a house? If I want to sell my Bitcoin to buy a house that's outrageously priced because it's going to get taxed back by the existing system that's manipulating money, right? I could choose to do that, or I could just choose to simplify my life. So that applies to everything. It applies to, so what would you expect in the free market? Let's take what AI is, and you've heard me say this over and over. Prices in a free market trend towards the marginal cost of production. The marginal cost of production of a line of code is zero. That's why your calculator app is free. So the next question is, what's the marginal cost of a line of code creating other lines of code? It's zero. So how can the CapEx be paid back under what I just said? It can't. You're going to see that observed through Bitcoin because prices are falling at that rate. And this other system is driving more and more bubbles and energy and nonsense to try to get you to invest in things in it, right? When the whole thing's being repriced by what I just said, what I said. And so I run a self-learning model on a different laptop, not connected to this, that is constantly learning on itself and all of these different models. Fable created it, DeepSeek audited it, found holes in it. Then the entire thing started taking off, and it's not using one model; it's using all the models. Some of those models are on my laptop now. They're free. The one that's running on my laptop for free, completely free, that is competing with these ones and different pieces of it that are competing with these ones. 6 months ago, the one that is free now would have been the best model. And I would have paid for it 6 months ago. That's how fast this is going. So everything's going to free. So how do you pay back all of this cost? How do you invest in, like Scott said, you're going to go and invest in one of these AI companies at the top, like against what I just said? Put it in Bitcoin. Reprice it, and you're repricing everything instead of taking a bet on somebody's execution against the free market.
I did want to ask you, Jeff, quickly as well too. So how do you think about where to invest? I know we have orange juice now. So what kind of calculations, if we're looking outside of Bitcoin, are you considering?
So orange juice was and I said this on Scott's show too. Orange juice was a revelation of what I've been saying a long time. We had a whole bunch of LPs in our fund that had been watching what was happening and owned really good cash flowing businesses, and were starting to ask us, how do we move more of our time into Bitcoin? We could sell our business for cash in the existing system to private equity, and all of the capital structure of the existing system feeds on the same broken model, and they're leveraging the business to be able to extract value. Sometimes their businesses be really great, like take a food business, and it does the right things, puts great ingredients in and everything else, and you sell it to somebody else who needs to leverage it, and they change all the ingredients and essentially fool buyers to keep buying it while they're packaging it up and selling it to someone else. That whole model looks the same because it's all broken. So we started getting inquiries from some of the businesses. How do we move more of our time into business? And we've had this business for 3 generations, and it's printing cash flow. We love it. And so what we thought about is, what do we create at long-term capital? We never have to sell. We just moving that capital into Bitcoin, and we take their business, and then we start accepting Bitcoin. We start potentially paying employees in Bitcoin. So you're moving Bitcoin into Main Street because those people who understand Bitcoin at the level that we do and what's happening, they also see, I want to build long-term value. I want this to be generational business. We're not looking to sell. We're looking to buy and run these forever, and move the entire ecosystem to this. So it's not a stock play.
Love it. Gentlemen, this has been absolutely fantastic. Scott, where can everybody go to follow you, your videos, all that fun stuff?
You can find me at Scott Melker on X. Everything else is linked there. Thank you.
Beautiful. Jeff, where can they go to follow you, my friend?
Well, no, sir. Before they follow me, go to jeffreybooth.com, just because there's only very few things that I'm actually in social media at all anymore, and they'll be listed there. And too many people try to scam and try to pretend they're me and take your money. I will never ask you for money.
If you enjoyed this episode with Scott and Jeff, make sure to like and subscribe, and check out last week's episode with the best and the brightest from the Bitcoin hardware industry.